I've had enormous amounts of difficulty with this fellowship, with abstinence. And I'm abstinent now, and I intend to hold on to it. I didn't like food as a child. I didn't like eating, didn't like food. I didn't like my mother's cooking, basically, sort of. And it wasn't until I went to catering college that I learned how to cook, and I started to enjoy food. And I piled on the weight. Only a stone at the time, but I piled on the weight. And I didn't know anything about dieting, sort of. I knew about restricting, but not dieting. So I restricted and lost a bit of weight. And from then on, from then till about 24, my weight always yo-yoed. I had moments of eating a lot, what you would call a binge, and then restricting to try and shed the pounds, sort of. And I can remember I had this little jumpsuit at the age of 23, 24. I'd come out of the army and I was drinking a lot and eating a lot. And I remember I was size 12 when I first got it. And within a couple of months, it was a summer outfit. In a couple of months, I was size 16, size 18, and it looked hideous on me. And I thought, how did that happen? How did that happen? Anyway, I never bothered with diet clubs, sort of. I thought I don't need them, sort of. I didn't recognize my problems with food, I just thought I had a healthy appetite. And when I eventually came to the fellowships, AA, the mother fellowship, sort of, I used to scoff at people, sort of. They went to FA, they went to OA, sort of, or sort of the fat club, I called it, sort of, really, sort of derogatory towards them. You can't control how much you eat, sort of, poor you, sort of. And it wasn't until and sort of everything I didn't realize, but everything in my life was a crutch. Everything in my life was a crutch. And then when I stopped drinking and eventually give up smoking, food became a crutch. Sort of. If someone knocked the door, sort of within half an hour after them leaving, I'd be eating. If someone rang me on the telephone or the mobile within quarter of an hour, I was eating. The nighttime eating, bedtime eating. Sort of. I'd take things into my bedroom and sort of say, this is going to do me for the night. This is what I'm going to eat tonight. Sort of. But I didn't recognize it as, I thought I needed a diet club, sort of needed to learn how to eat. And then I had, occasions where I went to Weight Watchers, sort of lost 2 stone or 2.5 stone and couldn't lose anymore, because it meant giving up certain foods, which I couldn't do. So that was a waste of time. And then I ballooned to a size 24, and I was having trouble with my joints, trouble with my feet, trouble respiratory troubles, and trouble with my heart. And of course, the doctor had mentioned my weight to me, sort of. You could do with losing weight, sort of. And I thought, how? I can't stick out diets, sort of. So someone I knew was going to GreySheeters. And they'd mentioned it to me before, sort of, and what they had to do, what they wanted to do and wished to do and did. And I thought, oh no, that's not for me, sort of. I can't possibly give up, sort of. I'll fail at the first, because that's how I approached diets. I'd fail, and I approached someone else, and they give me a phone number, to a meeting, and I went on the meeting. And I was still full of denial, I haven't all these physical problems I had, and it's not the food, it's not the food, you know, sort of, uh, you know, sort of, you know, uh, treating it like a diet, not doing what people suggested to do, I was different and special, um, and wanting to lose the weight, but not putting the effort in, because my main focus was getting slim again, getting slim, that was my main focus. It's not now, but my main focus was, So I was failing at every attempt, and I kept telling myself when I had a couple of weeks, this is easy, it's no problem. And then boom, relapse, So it was pitiful demoralization, I, you know, I, I didn't care so much about what you lot thought of me, but I cared about relapsing. That's what I cared about, going back to trying to keep off the food and the cravings and that's and the mental torture that I went through every time I relapsed, the mental torture. And then my sponsor didn't know what to do with me. She's very patient, she's very tolerant, she's been there herself, and we've started doing the steps. And then when I started doing the steps, and it's a thorough steps, and I've never done them like this before in AA or anything, questions you answer and things you read, and slowly but surely, I found a bit of peace with the food, not being too in bad taste, but I become a Catholic because I always wanted to become a Catholic, but religion wasn't big in our house, and I always wanted to be a Catholic. I always liked the ceremony. I liked the mass, and I liked what it taught. And in this fellowship, I was able to without shame, become a Catholic. So we're doing the 12 steps, and what appeared to me was so much that I didn't feel worthwhile in getting this program. I didn't feel worthy of getting this program. And I didn't feel that God of my understanding would help me get this program. Um, I I was an exception to the rule, I was one of those who couldn't be honest and wouldn't get it. Um, and that's proved wrong, Um, God could and would if he was sought. God could and would. I wasn't seeking him. I wasn't seeking him. I can talk to people now, what one of the rewards of getting abstinent. I can talk to people now, and I don't feel people are saying, "Look at the size of her, such a pretty face," like they used to say. Look at look at her. Those jeans. I can talk to people openly. I can mention, at times, some lovely woman told me, when I was in work, she said, you wouldn't have been able to do this job if you'd been the size you were, still been the size you were. And I thought, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. That's one of the gems I can hold on to, Um, and I can be open with people. And another thing, what's happened to me, I can see what's going on now. I was in a, thank you, Anna. I was in a fog before, um, self-centered, self-pitying, self-absorbed fog, and I'm coming out of that fog now, you know, sort of. And, you know, I said the other day, you know, I still go to AA, you know, sort of. And I said the other day, you know, sort of, I love my life. And I can honestly say I do love my life. Because when I was eating, I didn't like my life. I really didn't like my life. I didn't like me, and I didn't like anyone else either, you know. But you know, I could find the fault in you, and really, I was picking on myself. You know, I was really picking on myself. But I'm happy to be a member of Grey Sheet Anonymous. I'm happy to be going up to London on Saturday to one of my home groups. You know, sort of to see everyone. You know, nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. Nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. It's so important, you know, and it's lovely to see people. It's lovely that no one has ever told me that they wouldn't help me. They wouldn't give me advice. They wouldn't share what they do, you know. No one's ever done that, you know. And is sort of personally and sort of it's beginning to change me, you know, from that bitter, tied up, angry, because I was very angry, compulsive eater, you know. I'm beginning to unravel, you know. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.